Okay, call the meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Nice for you.
Any member of the public may speak on any matters before the commission at the time such matters are heard. Upon request to and recognition by the commission chairman, anyone may appeal any decision made by the commission to the city council. To appeal, you must file a written appeal and include an appeal fee of $922 with the city clerk within 15 calendar days of such action. Any person challenging actions of the Planning Commission may be limited to issues he or someone else raises in writing prior to or orally at the hearing. Any person may appeal the Planning Commission's determination that a proposed project is seaward of the appealable seaward area boundary to the Coastal Commission and following exhaustion of local appeals. Any aggrieved person may appeal actions on local coastal development permits seaward of the appealable area boundary to the Coastal Commission. Okay. Anyone have a chance to go through all the minutes of last meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve the meetings minutes as presented.
Okay.
I'll second.
Call for vote.
All
Commissioner-
ayes. I'm sorry.
All ayes.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we have one absent, alternate Hall.
Amanda?
Before we get started this evening, I want to make a couple of corrections to items that were on our agenda. The first one, of course, was, I think the agenda went out to your packet saying that we were still in 2019, and of course we're not. The second one is on item 4, we had noticed it to include a variance for the Crescent Stairs, and actually the Crescent Stairs were found they do not require a variance.
They don't.
So that is not included in our hearing this evening. And then, oh my God, I forgot what the last one was.
This would be reference to the CEP not being required, but the CEP is not required.
Oh, for 347 Descanso, we had noticed that it required a coastal development permit, and it did not actually require a coastal development permit, and that's noted on the agenda this evening. So that item, we would not be discussing a coastal development permit for 347 Descanso. We'll just be doing the site plan application for them. Let's see. And so our first item this evening is consideration of the changes to the accessory dwelling unit ordinance. As you recall, a few months ago, last year, we adopted an accessory dwelling unit ordinance in order to comply with the state statutes as it related to single-family dwellings. The state has now passed a whole lot of additional statutes regarding to accessory dwelling units, and so we are adopting those additional changes to us. I'm going to turn it over to Isaac, and he can go over what those changes are.
Good evening to the commission. It's nice to see you all again. I know we were talking about accessory dwelling units the last time I was here in November, and since that time. So just a reminder, any ordinance adopted by a local agency that is not compliant with the new state standards, and they're quite extensive and quite exacting, became null and void on January 1st of this year, which sort of precipitated the need to look at our own ADU ordinance and comply with the state standards. So much of what's in front of you this evening for the ordinance comes straight from state statute. But the benefits of adopting a local ordinance as opposed to just relying on the state code, which would happen for someone applying for an ADU starting this year is that there are some minor areas where there is local discretion allowed. For instance, on architectural standards, there's something within the existing code that's also in the ordinance that says building materials need to be the same. As long as those standards, those architectural standards are objective, then they're okay by the state. And so the ordinance before you this evening for possible recommendation to the City Council is the same that that I believe you saw last month in December when Scott, our city attorney, was present. But of course, I'm here for any questions. The staff's recommendation is that the commission recommend approval to the City Council of the ADU ordinance. And to take any public comment, this has been noticed as a public hearing item since it amends the zoning code.
So can we ask questions, or should we?
Yes.
Okay.
You can, well, yes, you can ask questions of me if you would like to start and then open the public hearing after that.
So I've had people come and talk to me about this and have questions. I wanted, reading through this, and it may be, have we already had ADUs applied for and approved for to date?
We've had two.
So, and that one would be on East Whitley? Is that an ADU?
There's one on Whitley.
There's
Well, it
the
could
only
be
one.
Whitley. It could be Whitley.
I'm sorry. The only one that has received an over-the-counter permit is at 316 Las Lomas for Laura York.
Okay. Okay. I thought that because I was looking through this and I thought, wow, that the one, the Dow House behind, across from Overlook, I thought that was an ADU.
It will be eventually. Right now, they don't have permission to put in the kitchen in it.
Okay, because I'm just using that for an example. I'm looking at what could happen. So a second story or two-story attached, a second story or two-story attached, and then a single story attached or detached ADU may not exceed 16 feet in height above grade. That thing looks giant. I mean, it's really high. So I just don't know what the deal is with that. But the one thing that two of my neighbors came to me about was and I think one came to you as well, is when a garage, carport, or covered parking structure is demolished in conjunction with the construction of an ADU or converted to an ADU, those off-street parking spaces are not required to be replaced. And I don't know how much we can tweak this, because on Whitley, it's, as was reported by Rocio, it's the worst parking street in the world. We have all those stacked dwellings. And already we have places where people were required to put carports or spaces for carts to park, but they didn't do the curb, so you can't, access them without like a four-wheel drive. So that's one thing I just wanted to point out. And two of my neighbors brought it up. I didn't even think about it because I am a lucky person. I have parking.
Right. And
so anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because I think that could be a problem for us if we're and I don't know, is that something amenable? They
are both state standards. Certainly, I know just from the last time I've been before the commission in November, there's a lot in this where we're trying to fit the uniqueness of Avalon into state standards that are really difficult in terms of, like you said, the 16-foot height limitation is a state standard, as is that we can require parking except in the instant you mentioned. So when you have a converted ADU from a garage, the city cannot require additional parking as a result, and that's been a tweak to the prior law. And so one thought that the planning director and I have discussed has been the possibility of thinking about the city's vehicle code that's broadly applicable to all residential development, but we are really hamstrung in terms of our ADU ordinance. Both items you mentioned, and certainly that concern from residents is valid, but those are our state standards, both the 16 feet height and the instance where for converted ADUs from garages, we cannot require replacement parking.
Okay.
And with the building, and I'm sure Amanda's aware of construction that's going on, those are all inspected by the inspector, correct?
Yes,
So it wouldn't be anything that is above height would require a variance.
correct.
Correct.
The property on Whitley that you're thinking of was within the height variance when they proposed it. It was within the height envelope for their lot,
And would that include the top deck?
yes.
Okay, and then the other thing that I was looking at, on the maximum size in 95607, why is it 850 square feet? And then, you know what I'm saying? And then somewhere else it says 800 square feet in 95604, section 2. So what's that, why did they get that, what's that extra 50 feet? I was just confused.
I believe the 850 square feet or 1,000 square feet for a unit with 2 bedrooms. I think the difference comes in, and I would have to look at the portion that's 800 square feet because I know it's complicated. I wonder if that's specific to the converted units, the ones that are a part of the ADUs.
Trying to see that, but I didn't see that.
Yeah, but that's
I'm sorry, could you
ahead.
tell me where the 850 was again?
Well, this, where it's 956.604, section 2,
Where's the 800
is
square
where
feet?
it says 800, and then in 95607, it's talking about 850. And and then there's another one that says 800, so I looked at it and read it several times, but I don't have that kind of legal eye, so thinking, aren't they talking about the same thing, but putting 50 square feet difference in, I don't know why the 850 is there, that's all.
Maybe the state made a mistake.
Oh, please. No.
Because I think
It's me, I don't
607,
see it.
no, I think 607 talks about a detached or attached. It's 850 square feet for a studio or 1 bedroom, or 1,000 square feet for a 2 bedroom. And then 604 is a detached.
See, I was trying, but I couldn't
me
see
see.
it, but that could just be me.
I think it's probably different based on whether you can require, which permit you can require. I hate to say it, I'm looking at the state statute right now, and I don't think it's very edifying because it does describe, this has been vetted by our housing working group team, but it does, C2 of the ordinance in question that this is based on does describe the fact that a local agency cannot establish minimum square footage below 850 square feet or 1,000 square feet for an ADU that provides more than 1 bedroom. And then separately and right under that, there's a different subsection that says any other minimum or maximum size for an ADU based upon a percentage of the proposed or existing dwelling unit with limits on lot coverage, floor area ratio, open space, and minimum lot size, etc., cannot be less than 800 square foot. So I think probably we're looking at a provision in state law that's similarly confusing.
So, I see what you're saying, because I was under the impression when we were first going over this, that it was 50% of the existing home, of the first home, say the front home, it's 50% of any existing single-family dwelling. And then now it's saying it can't be less, a 1-bedroom cannot be less than a certain square footage of 800 square feet. However, in Avalon.
No, it's 800 square feet or smaller.
Okay.
And I would say, we're, in terms of lot coverage and sort of floor area ratio, those are percentages in the ordinance where the commission has some discretion. So these are standards that came from the last go round or potentially 2 months ago in November. But those standards are still subservient to this idea that you cannot make it less than a certain, you cannot do anything to disallow an ADU that's under a certain square footage.
And then, under owner occupancy.
Yes. Yep.
What is the, what is the point?
Yeah. So the state's thinking on that. I can actually speak to that somewhat intelligently, although, as we're going through this, a lot of this stuff comes right from the ordinance, and even as I go through it, it's confusing to me. But the owner occupancy restriction, the idea is there were a lot of cities in the state that required owner occupancy for an ADU, and the state said, we're going to test drive this program where for the first 5 years that this law is in effect, from 2020 to 2025, you cannot have an owner occupancy restriction. After that, you can. This ordinance has been written, I believe, in a way that says, once 2025 comes around, we're going to have that restriction, I believe. So, so basically we're in this sort of experimental period. Where, and a lot of this is true there's other state laws related to the approval process for housing developments more generally, where there are a whole host of specific requirements that are only in effect until 2025, ostensibly so the state can look at how that impacts all of these various jurisdictions, from Avalon to something that's on the complete opposite end of Avalon. So that's why there's this strange quirk about an express prohibition on that for 5 years.
And then how does that usually go? Does it automatically go, or do we have another opportunity to say, because that could be restricting then anybody's ability to put in a year-round rental in their home, should they decide to do that?
Yeah, so it's written as of now so that basically the ordinance has been written so that as soon as we have the ability as a city to mandate an owner occupancy requirement in 2025, we do. Certainly we can amend it, we could amend the ordinance, we could see how these handful of years play out in terms of what the actual restriction looks like, and come back to it. And one thing that the planning director, because we were discussing this earlier, and I think she has a really good point, we're likely to see, not only are we going to see technical advice on ADUs from the Department of Housing and Community Development, hopefully soon, but there's also going to be challenges and both regulatory and case law challenges that may impact some of these restrictions. And so we're sort of all along for the ride in the meantime in terms of some of these. And especially when we're talking, I think it's great to get the input. I mean, when we're talking about how confusing it is, even between an 800 and 850 square foot requirement, we're hoping that not only once we pass these state standards, they're going to be applicable throughout, but we might have more guidance, more practical guidance from the State Department of Housing and Community Development, hopefully at some point, to help us interpret some of these that are a bit confusing.
Well, then I'm going to say that we're going to have to work really hard on parking.
Yes.
Because the parking issue is going to impact some streets.
So I'd like to...
not that we're going to have thousands.
I'd like to add into that whole parking discussion for a moment. We have a number of properties on the island that were originally built with a parking requirement. So now what basically you're telling us is the state's going to dictate to us, our community, what we can and cannot do regarding parking, even though the building was built initially with a parking requirement. That being said, have other communities at this point challenged the state and their authority to dictate to communities what we can and cannot do with their housing? So it's a little insulting that the state basically shoves this down our throat. Now, I'm not disagreeing that we need more housing. I mean, I'm kind of in favor and support of this.
Right.
The second part of that dialogue in question that I want to direct to you is the deed restriction. If we expect this to produce more housing in our community, having a deed restriction requirement is counterproductive. It's not going to achieve any additional housing as a result of putting a deed restriction on these properties. It's one more hurdle that an owner has to go through and lenders have to participate in. It's a mess. There's enough language in here, I think, that gives us enough teeth in what that unit can and cannot be used for. So did the state mandate the deed restriction? Is that how that came about, or is that a way for us to kind of control and manage who actually has an ADU and who doesn't?
So let me take a look, and let me first address the parking issue. But I believe the deed restriction is a requirement. I'll look for it in state statute. But the parking restriction, I'm not aware, although I haven't been intimately involved with another city that has Avalon sort of unique parking considerations. So I am not at this point aware of another city that I've worked with that's sort of where it would be as much of sort of a significant impact that it's going to be to Avalon. Some of the parking requirements, there are certain exceptions where we cannot require parking spaces, and then generally the default rule is that with the exception of sort of these converted garages and instances that are in the ordinance that may not be applicable to Avalon, for instance, near a major transit stop, things like that, generally we can allow one off-site parking space. That's sort of the state standard on that. But I am not aware of another agency, although I'm sure these conversations are happening up and down the state. I'm sure there are instances where other agencies have similar concerns of parking, but I'm not aware of any at this time.
Well, it's so bizarre because it says you have to have parking if you're doing an ADU. However, if you're tearing down a garage or converting a garage or a tear down, then if you're taking away parking, then you don't have to have. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So I hope that will get challenged. And then the other issue that is really kind of, that other part that is going to be difficult for us to fulfill in the wisdom of blanketing this thing over the entire state is the walking distance to public transit. I mean, we have such limited coverage of transit, and we have all these hills. So, just to say that you have to be within a half mile, I think it's pretty restrictive for some people.
So the parking restriction, the exception from that general rule that you can require one off-street parking space for an ADU, there's an exception from that where no parking space is required within 1/2 mile walking distance of public transit, and that is a defined term under a term of art under the statute. So we're talking about a bus stop or train station. And so, I agree. I mean, I think especially in a place this small that may be something that needs to be looked at as these ADUs come in, which unfortunately, and as you all are aware, have to be approved sort of ministerially in line with these state standards. But it is something where the city's going to have to, and staff is going to have to sort of pick up the slack to look at that closely and in terms of bus routes on the island.
Could it be that all houses are within a half mile?
Only 1 square mile, so it
Yeah.
runs down the middle.
So,
Everybody's on.
so what it means is no parking's required,
Yeah.
probably, for ADUs.
Right, and I think this-
attached or
Even though,
detached.
so it says it
And I-
is.
I mean, it sounds to me as there was a pretty thorough discussion about housing versus parking, and it tipped in
Housing what?
favor of housing.
And I think the state could take the position that our subsidized taxi service is a public transportation service and they come to your front door.
Didn't we also discuss that ADU could get a golf cart or could not?
No, I think it
The-
could. Isn't
it's
it
not
every
in-
address?
It's,
Wait,
is-
say it again. Say it
Can an
again.
ADU get a golf cart or not?
It
The-
says that it says, in this one part, it says, generally one off-street parking space is required for each ADU. But then again, under the thing is, the parking space may be provided in setback areas or as a tandem parking is.
So it sounds to
blah,
me
blah,
like
blah.
you get a golf cart with an ADU. If you've got to
Under-
require a parking space.
our ADU ordinance does not restrict vehicle registration. If the city wanted to restrict an autoette from being registered to a housing unit that's designed for year-round residents, Scott said we would have to do that in the vehicle code. So that would have to be an additional,
I don't particularly have a problem with it. I think if you're
Change.
going to make a residence someplace, you've got to allow them a golf cart like someone else. I mean,
Right.
Otherwise, you're just going backwards.
and the other thing too is, that's another one of the Avalon uniqueness, is full-size vehicles aren't registered to addresses. They're registered to people. So you could have someone living in a 1,000-square-foot ADU that has 2 full-size vehicles parked on the street because they're registered.
But they
to
could
people.
have had it no matter where they lived in Avalon.
Correct.
So that's.
And I think the point was made when we were discussing this earlier with the assistant city manager in relation to impact fees, is ADUs are new vehicles where blue stickers are existing vehicles. They're already here. So, yeah, the state didn't talk to us.
But I understand what you're saying, Paula, but at the same time, if they can't get a golf cart and they can't do that, I think you're not gonna have as many ADUs or people wanting to move into them to be treated as a resident as well.
I want to see this be like a success, but it just seems odd to me that, they're saying, okay, our vehicle code says we have to have, if they're gonna build an ADU and it's a attached or detached ADU, it has to have parking. But if you're going to take some kind of parking space and destroy it and then put an ADU in, you don't have to have parking.
No, you still have to have parking, but you lose a parking spot to gain a parking spot.
I think you're not required to replace.
No, you're not required to replace those, which, I mean,
Right.
to me
But you
is
have
like
to have
the
one.
really
But you have to have one.
According to the municipal code.
Right.
So it's so odd, and all I see is it exacerbating the existing problem. So I mean, this is all gonna come with the parking nightmare if we ever get to it, but
I think the
hopefully.
same is true with the deed restriction.
I-
And
the deed restriction-
on people's property, and people go, no, thank you.
Well, and I think the deed restriction is basically is restricting that they can't sell it as a condo.
And that's
And there's
already,
some
but
other-
that's already in the language.
Right.
And that they have to rent it to a year-round resident at least
6
6
months
months
out
of the
there.
year. That's
Yeah.
already in the
And the
language, so it
shortest
can't
term
turn into a
is 6
Right.
CUP.
I'm taking a look at the ordinance, and since this is a public hearing item, we can pull it up. And still, if I can, I haven't found the deed restriction language. If this ultimately turns up to be a discretionary item, and if the commission's direction is ultimately to approve the resolution, I mean, we could do that with a note that if the deed restriction is not required under state law to strike that provision. My recollection was we were recommending it because it came from state law, but if it doesn't, and it's an area where that's something the commission wants to consider, so perhaps we take further questions, and I'll keep digging for it, and then that's something that over the course of this item we can consider if it's where the direction goes.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to the public. Anybody in the audience care to speak on this item?
Hi, I'm Charlie Canby. Excuse me. I live on Whitley, along with Paula, so I'm well aware of the parking issue. That's a reason I'm concerned. I'm concerned about the ADUs and the parking issue. It sounds like if someone tears down a garage or creates a carport or a garage into housing ADU, then we get one more car on the street from the ADU, and then we've lost the parking spot, so there's 2 more cars on the road, which doesn't make sense after all our efforts to provide parking and insist that we have parking. I have a question. If someone builds a legitimate ADU and doesn't tear down a parking structure, are they required to provide parking for that new ADU?
It says so.
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah, I believe the main exception from the parking restriction is for the purpose is supposed to be for the conversion of the conversion of a garage into a ADU. That's the purpose, is to accept from the parking requirement that situation.
So it's,
You're right, Charlie. I mean, that's what it says. 1 off-street parking space is required for each ADU.
Right.
Oh,
I think
okay. So,
there
well,
are
that's good,
exceptions.
because there aren't too many instances where someone will tear down the garage, or, well, actually on Whitley, there's a couple where they would just fill it in.
Right.
Can we craft our vehicle permit that requires or states that if you destroy your parking area, you lose the privilege for the golf cart? What I'm saying is, if someone had a house with an off-street parking, they're allowed a golf cart. And then when they destroy that parking space that has been required, can they be restricted from having that golf cart? An example is up the street from me at the Conservancy House. They split up that building into 3 units, 3 or 4. They added a unit and they didn't add parking. So in the minutes, they agreed that, the Conservancy agreed that they would not have a golf cart for that unit. So it has happened in the past that they've restricted a unit in town from having a golf cart because they didn't provide parking. So what I'm hopeful is that when someone destroys their parking space for an ADU, that we say, okay, you got rid of your required parking, you have to get rid of your permit. Another far-fetched, well, maybe not so far-fetched, someone could build a new house with a garage. We'd say, you have to have off-street parking. So they build a new house with a garage, and then next year they go, oh, I'm converting it into an ADU. So there they get a golf cart for the ADU, and they've destroyed their parking space, and now we have 2 cars on the street. So that's something that could happen. I mean, there's a lot of shenanigans taking place. So that's why I hope we can craft our parking permit requirements that you have to maintain a parking spots that went with the building. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie.
I want to share also during the public comments that we had received an email from a property owner on Whitley. It's from the Warner family, and they've expressed the same concerns about loss of parking and that it would have a negative impact on the street to take up parking or not require off-street parking for the accessory dwelling units.
Whitley's a
Mess.
very congested street amongst
It's the
quite
worst.
other ones.
It's the worst.
It's the longest.
I went up Metropole today.
And
it
it's
was like the
stacked,
same.
and I remember when you gave us that report, that was, you figured out the average square feet and how many had been issued, and we're way short on that particular street.
What's the compliance and review process? So once this ordinance is passed, it goes to the state, and the state reviews it and puts its rubber stamp on it and says, congratulations, Avalon, you meet the requirement. Is that basically what happens?
No, we don't have an affirmative obligation to submit our ADU ordinance to the state. We have obligations to submit, density bonus over a certain percentage, things of that nature, but I'm not aware of any affirmative obligation. The idea from HCD is that they've built out their enforcement team to look at things like this, and certainly I think the consideration in terms of enforcement is not that HCD would sort of be looking at everyone's individual ordinances, but just that if there's anything non-compliant under the state law, it's null and void, so that if such an issue came up with an applicant, the city would, their ordinance would be ineffective, unenforceable, and the city would still have to approve the ADU.
Okay, so that being said, it seems to me that their goal and objective is to provide more housing in all communities. Then why don't we approve this process and require off-street parking for every additional unit, thrown together, and forget the deed restriction and move forward? It'll, one, encourage more housing. It'll solve the parking requirement. And if the state then challenges us later on saying, hey, you can't do this with your parking requirement, you can't do this with your deed restriction, then we address it then.
I've got before you even answer that, it sounds like what you said earlier, 2 things happen. One is, this already is the law for Avalon. I mean, this, whether we adopt it or not, this is.
Well, it's the state of California.
State of California.
Well,
We're in the state of
So we've got
California.
the opportunity to put our tweaks on it to make it
Such
fit
as
Avalon.
parking.
possibly, as long as we're consistent with this, and
Right.
and I'm just thinking, because Avalon is sort of an agent of the state, it seems like this is already here in, like many other state laws, that this is it. And then the second thing, the parking part is a little confusing to me, because if everything is within a half-mile of transit, I don't think any type of ADU requires parking, from the way I'm reading this.
Because everything in this
Everything.
town is only
Everything,
one
no, so
square
whether
mile.
it's,
So it
there is
cancels
no
the other
parking
requirement.
for ADUs, period.
So then it would cancel the other requirement that requires parking.
Right.
And
Which, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I mean, to me, how many do we get in a practical
Right,
sense?
right.
And
Well, we
we're
wish.
trying to squeeze in as much housing as possible, but it's my understanding from reading this does a pretty good job
Of canceling.
putting housing first.
So I think
Parking second.
regarding the parking, I can't advise that we adopt an ordinance where the parking is dealt with in any instance where it sort of is in violation or contrary to the state restrictions, because again, the ordinance would be null and void, so it would be unenforceable. So even assuming that the commission and the council passed it, the ordinance is unenforceable, full stop. So I think in terms of the parking concerns, the legitimate parking concerns, I think the way, probably the most feasible way to think about it is what can we require that's not specific to these restrictions for ADUs, and it might not be able to hit the issue squarely on its head regarding the addition of these new residential housing, but it might be a broader look at the city's vehicle code, as the planning directors mentioned, because we couldn't pass an ADU that had non-compliant parking restrictions in it and have it be enforceable up until it was challenged. It would just be null and void at the time it was passed, essentially.
So, okay, so how much room do we have as a local government to, I wouldn't say tweak, I mean, because we're here to see how it would work for our city, correct? And see if we can change things a little bit. And now you're saying, regardless of if we change things, that it's not going to matter because it's the state, which we all know. So then what are
Why pass it?
Yeah, it seems like our hands are tied right now.
Our hands are tied. Again, there are a couple instances, like if we're talking about just, they're very minor in the scheme of things, and I understand the frustration. If we're talking about the ability to set out sort of some policies and procedures in terms of architectural standards and how it's actually going to work, I mean, it's ministerial approval. It requires that it be done without discretionary approval, but trying to set out sort of the guidelines so that we're not just having to consult the state statutes where all of these requirements live. And it's an unappealing answer, and it's unappealing to sit here and just say, we can't do this and we can't do this, because it's much different from most things that are brought to the commission's consideration.
So if we were to make a recommendation, as Bart and Bob said, then, and if it was passed, it basically, we just hope no one challenges us, because if someone challenges us, they're gonna, right?
And then-
I mean, that's
I don't
what
think
I'm.
anyone has to challenge us, is what he's saying. It's
Well, that's what
already null
it's
and void.
already null and void. So it's almost like it's,
State ordinance. so what-
yeah, so what are we doing?
So
And
the-
also, I want to ask, what is it that you guys are, talk to me about the deed restriction that you are objecting to. I mean, it won't make any difference, but I want to hear your point of view again.
Anytime you put a deed restriction on a piece of property, you're gonna stop someone from doing something. You're gonna make someone think twice, 3 times, 4 times about doing such a thing. Right now, if you look at it, you can't take an ADU and turn it into a vacation rental. It has to be rented for a minimum of 6 months out of the year. So that, to us, is helping our
right.
year-round housing. So if we can take the deed restriction out, maybe more people will do it, and you'll have more housing. But if you leave the deed restriction in, people are gonna say, I don't wanna play this
Well,
game.
we're probably not going to agree there, but I'm just saying, if that was the intent to say, I'll do this, and then 6 months down the road, I'll make it into a conditional
And
use, make it into a transient rental.
Understand.
That
But that's
for
that's
me
what's
is,
written in
But
here
also,
saying it
but
can't
also to
happen.
put a deed restriction on, it's also going to require the lender to sign on to that deed restriction.
and it also has, you could roll it back, but it would take away using the facilities of that, like the kitchen. It's what it's saying is you could put it to the planning. So.
So what I was curious about, if the state says it has to be in there, it has to be in there. My point
Right.
is that if
I
our
get what
goal and
you're saying.
ambition is to develop more housing, you need to take the handcuffs off.
So I think I've thrown it out in real time to see if I can check about the deed restriction. I think let me first start with with commission's options, and then we can talk about the deed restriction, because I think the consensus among the commission, or there's a strong preference that if that's not a state mandate, we take it out. And so I would recommend if the commission gets there, that you would recommend the ordinance with a caveat regarding deed restrictions if that's not a state law standard. I will say that the options before the commission in terms of this ordinance are either to recommend it to council or not make a recommendation, at which point, we're where we are right now, which is we're subject to the state standards.
Amanda,
Ma'am.
I have I'm thinking back to previous discussions, and I believe we put that deed restriction. I mean, I believe that the commission didn't speak about not making it a vacation rental.
Right, and I think that was one of the places where the cities were allowed some latitude, was to.
So then it's not state.
But the language that says it can't be a transient rental, I think that is something that we came up with.
Yeah, that's what
But the other language that requires the deed restriction, I think that's what
okay.
Isaac is talking about. That
Yeah, I'm not seeing, when I look at the law, and I'm trying to get confirmation, but when I look at the actual statute, I'm thinking maybe the deed restriction was something that the city may be considered. I would say some of these restrictions are going to be in place irrespective. I mean, the idea that it cannot be sold separately, but to get to Bob's comment, I think if ultimately the recommendation is to recommend the ordinance to council, the motion could be that provided the deed restriction's not a state standard, it's removed as part of what the council considers.
And also, if we have to, there really is not much choice, just that our concerns lie with parking. And like you say, our hands are fairly tied, but if that's the case with the deed restriction, and they might want to look at that, and they might want to, I don't know what they can do.
I think the commission can. I will say from my knowledge of the law that the parking restriction's a bit more cut and dry in terms of how it's spelled out in state law. I think the commission could certainly recommend, as part of the recommendation to council, could strike the language about deed restriction provided it's compliant with the state standards, and could request as part of that recommendation that the council consider alternative forms to ensure that the city's parking is protected and that the city standards could do something like that. I think the difference between is just that the language from the parking, I feel fairly confident, is just basically straight out of our state statute.
But that the city council should know that the commission has talked about and see it as an issue that may have to come with considerations of the vehicle code or something. That just says, look at that a little bit more, because you guys, it's going to make a mess here.
I want to point out that the rental term, which says it can't be rented for shorter than 6 months, is not part of the deed restriction.
Right.
That's
That's
general requirements.
Restriction,
so
there's
that's
still
not
the protections.
There's still the layers of protection.
That's right.
in
the ordinance. That's correct.
If you look at 95605, it tells you the 6 months, and it says you can't convey the property separately, so you can't subdivide it, and you can't say, hey, I'm selling the pool house.
That's correct. And I wish. Go ahead.
Is there anything new about requirement for Edison to say it's okay to build? Because as of right now,
the restrictions haven't been lifted. No.
So let me.
What's the new scoop on that?
Okay, so Amanda, our planning director, has reached out to California Edison and has a response that we've talked about. I would just note, specific to the state law, we have a mandate from the state that we're subject to the bulk of these restrictions and ministerial approval, and we can't do anything that hinders the growth of the ADUs, et cetera, et cetera. All this windup is to say we don't have dominion over Southern California Edison. So as it relates to water allocation and things of that nature, I'm not aware. I mean, they have passed laws that are applicable to HOAs, to homeowner associations, where they expressly say an HOA can't do certain things that restrict ADUs, but this law is specific to local agencies. So Southern California Edison and the reality of how that works is outside of these standards. And with that, I'll let Amanda.
Well, I sent some questions out to Cooper Cameron at Edison, who was very helpful. So the initial question was, if we were splitting a large 5-bedroom home into 2 units, and one of those was going to be an ADU, that would not require an additional water allocation because you're using existing bedrooms. If you're converting a basement or an attic or a garage that has not been occupied as habitable space, that would require a water allocation from Edison. And of course, a detached ADU would require a water allocation from Edison, or like a will serve letter. You know, that's what the allocation is. But we also asked the question, would Edison require ADUs to be metered separately? Would they need a separate meter? And Edison's response was, ADUs will be individually metered wherever feasible. If individual metering is not feasible due to unique circumstances, the service and metering configuration will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, so.
Actually, a follow-up question is, right now it's city policy to go ahead and issue the building permit without Edison's okay, and then you just don't get an occupancy permit?
Okay.
No,
until-
we changed that.
changed? Okay.
So I'm so confused here, Amanda, because I would really like to go back and I want to watch the tapes, because I was under the impression when ADUs came out that it was a certain percentage of the single family, the original home that's sitting there, and if it has a piece of land, you can build an ADU, and it was not going to require a meter, and that was the whole thing of the incentive to build these ADUs and create new housings. Does anybody know how much a new meter costs?
Oh, yeah.
No.
I mean, and
You
that,
know, so if they
and
say
that they
it's-
were, because it was part of that home, it was going to tie into the existing utilities, and there was no water, and I know that's what happened, and I would like to get a recap.
The state language specifically says
States-
that it doesn't require additional
Yes.
metering, right?
The state language relates to capacity charges and development impact fees. It doesn't appear to relate to whether or not you get an extra meter so that you get a separate bill for that property.
You
'Cause that's
still
what that
have-
extra meter
You
is.
still are required to pay the permits required to tie into the existing utilities. And if the city is taking these for ADU, then that means you're tying in
To the
to the existing meter. You're not required for a new meter. So we need to, this is great discussion, but I don't want to move forward until, because I feel like we talked about that there's already been ADUs approved here and almost finished, and now we're backpedaling and saying, wait, whoa.
But I think our ordinance is going to codify what the state statutes have handed down and include the tweaks that we're allowed to make. Whether we
Section-
adopt this ordinance or not is not going to change, cannot govern Edison's policy.
But-
So not adopting the ordinance, someone could still walk in the door tomorrow and go, I'd like a building permit for an ADU, and I'd have to go, okay.
Yes, exactly. So so the state says an ADU can tie into an existing meter,
Yeah.
okay? And you're taking the money, the city is taking the money for the permits, and then now all of a sudden, oh wait, the Edison decided they don't want to give you water.
But I don't know if that's what the state statute said.
Because that's kind of what I'm hearing, and that's kind of not what.
Sounds like Edison overrides state or
Right.
city.
And to me, that's no incentive for anyone to go, I mean, to get your own utilities is a lot of money, and this is what the state is requiring, wanting us to be able to create housing. Well, I thought this was the whole purpose of this, is to make it easier for people to do this.
Yeah, you can look at it's double indemnity, because if you are saying you don't have to get a new meter and you're tying into an existing thing, then that person is getting over, like they're getting what another person is gonna have to pay for to have a
And that's still
detached.
expensive.
Yeah, it's wacky. So that is kind, I don't know.
Well,
Is there any way to say that this is the law? Sorry, Edison. This is the state law.
Well, I would like,
Come on.
I would like to get more information and gather more information.
But this goes into effect, I mean, it's a
Yeah,
done deal.
It is in effect, but we're
Whether
here
we pass
as,
this tonight or not.
Right,
it's
right.
in effect.
I would make the
Exactly.
argument, it's just going to make Amanda's job easier, because in a sense, that's a big part, or whoever's administering this, that they don't have to jump to the big state law books.
I
Or
think
photocopies of that they can just use the ordinance that they are normally using.
I think there are some practical considerations like that in terms of just having our municipal code reflect the new state standards, which will also be easier for our residents to be aware of. I would think to sort of be aware of these instances where there are state standards and the instances where there are things codified in the municipal code that talk about. Again, I'm grabbing onto the very small parts, but again, architectural standards, things like that are city specific, where we do have some degree of discretion. I would say that we do not need to. Hopefully, this is good news. The deed restriction's a local thing, so we can remove that from this ordinance.
that's good.
Yeah.
And also, this is really actually frightening, because a person comes to get an ADU permit and do the process through Amanda at the planning department, and complies with all the standards, okay? And goes to tie in and all this, and then and you're talking, now you've already almost completed the job, and how much hundreds of thousands of dollars, and now you're telling this person, oh, wait, now you don't get water. That to me sounds like a big, huge liability for the city.
The city's not telling them they don't get water. Edison's telling them.
I know, but
And it sounds like
Yeah,
the
and
city
you know
now
what?
doesn't issue.
And they're gonna, and the reality is, the way they regulate and they allocate water, they're required right now to allocate the water that's available, so.
But when we were talking about this, it said you don't need a water allocation.
But you look at the utilities.
Well, if you're
So-
converting
question-
downstairs
It's
one
true.
bedroom into a
Well, nobody can do
one-bedroom
this
unit.
at all.
They
It's
break
true.
it,
Nobody
they
can
break
really
it
do
down
any
here,
of
and
it because
imagine this.
Unless you're doing it within the existing structure.
Right,
that's right.
No detached ADUs
Right.
can be permitted literally because there's no water.
That's
So-
correct. Yes.
Yeah.
It's the
So at this point, the best thing we're gonna get out of this is some conversions right now, and some detached, maybe once Edison
Right.
releases some water. And because this is being shoved down our throat by the state, I'm gonna go ahead and make the recommendation that we pass this on to council with one caveat, that we're concerned about parking, and let them address the parking.
and Commissioner, I would also
about the deed restriction?
recommend
The
if
deed
And we're
restriction.
and
removing
remove
the
the
deed
deed restriction.
And
That's
I
right.
would just also say, hands are tied for many people because of water.
Right.
I think that should be something else that gets
Yep.
mentioned
Would
too.
anybody else like to speak on this item?
Didn't open the public hearing.
I
She
did.
opened it.
Okay.
Didn't close it.
Bob?
Oh, that's right.
I'm gonna close the public hearing. Okay.
So if
Make
I
a recommendation.
Bob's making a motion.
heard Bob's motion, it was to recommend to council the draft ADU ordinance with the removal of deed restriction language to the extent that's not required under state law, and with direction to council to look at the parking concerns that are specific to Avalon, to the extent the city can study those issues.
And water.
And water.
And when you do this as an ADU, can you take bedrooms and basically turn them into ADUs in your house? So you got a 5-bedroom house, now you got 5 golf carts.
Now you have 5 what?
Golf carts?
Well,
Well, you
Theoretically.
you don't get 5 ADUs, I don't think.
you wouldn't be able to split, but you might be able to.
You only get one
You
ADU
see what
per
I'm saying?
lot.
I'm just saying it is.
That's, Eric's correct. You
only get
don't
one
have
per lot.
unlimited number of
one per
ADUs.
lot, okay.
But JDUs, couldn't, if you, you can have 2 in a house, right? Or you can have as many
Well,
as you have
duplex
all
can
the.
have one.
As long as it's, wait, JDUs too? The little ones? You can, within a house, can't you have more than one?
I think it depends what your zoning is. I mean, you could have a duplex and then an ADU that would bump you over the normal density. If you're in a single-family zone, which do we have one in Avalon? You know what I mean? It's a little funky, but you're not going to turn a 5-bedroom house probably into.
You can have,
Oh, and I second the motion. I'll say that.
Call for vote.
Sorry.
By the way.
By the way, oh yeah, in the midst of things.
Call for vote.
Commissioner Kennedy?
Aye.
Commissioner Glass?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Hewart?
Aye.
Chairman Montano?
Aye.
Commissioner Putnam?
Aye.
Commissioner Patterson?
Aye.
And Commissioner Phillips?
Aye.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your patience in the audience.
Okay.
As we noted earlier, item number 3 was withheld from the agenda. This was a setback variance and a coastal development permit for a project at 316 Las Lomas, and that project has been withdrawn. No, she's asked us to continue it to February, so we need to open the public hearing and continue the hearing to February, please.
Okay, so I'm going to open the public hearing for item number 3. Anybody in the public like to speak on this item? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing to carry it over.
Chairman, you'd leave the public hearing open, or Chairwoman, sorry.
Chairwoman, okay.
You'd just leave the public hearing open to a date certain.
We're carrying it over. Sorry.
And continue it to the February agenda.
Regular meeting.
Okay, item number.
Do they need to vote on that, Isaac?
No.
Okay. Item number 4 is a public hearing for a site plan and a coastal development permit to do some repairs to the crescent stairs that are up on the hillside above the Yacht Club on city property. This is a city public works project. This is a permit to repair and fortify the existing retaining wall structure that is the foundation for the Crescent Avenue staircase. They're going to be putting in additional piles and tiebacks and horizontal members. As you know, we've had a little bit of slippage on that hillside because of the storms, and this is a proposal to do that repair. It is, we will be asking you to make 2 additional findings that are not in your staff report. One of them is that it is within the 300-foot appealable zone to the Coastal Commission. So if someone's not happy with this coastal development permit, they could appeal it to the Coastal Commission. And the second one is that this development does not qualify as being seaward of the nearest public highway. So those are 2 findings we're asking you to make. And then we would be bringing back let me back up. We had also noted that this project might need a variance, which it does not require, and so what we would propose is that we would bring back the resolution in February for you to adopt it with all the corrected findings. This would not preclude Mr. Greenlaw from proceeding with this project, and Mr. Greenlaw's in the audience if you have any questions for him.
Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. Hi, Bob. Good evening, Bob.
Hi. Bob, I see that they need to do repairs on the stairs. My question, and this question I brought up for the last several months to the city, is when do we remove the dirt from the road below where these stairs are there? It's not only the stairs, but behind the K-rails that's coming out onto the road now. Is that something we have planned, to remove the K-rails and take them down before the fences collapse or anything like that?
Yes. So we're actually got a couple projects. This is one project, and because there is a big slough up there, we want to remove that slide. That's part of this project. So there's about 100 cubic yards max of dirt up there that we want to unload over the cliff and put on the road, haul it off. Okay, and then make some repairs to the wall, which is putting some more tie back because the slip out has exposed the caissons that are holding the piles. So we're going to go in there and try to put what is called a whaler. It's another structural horizontal support on those piles, and then put some additional tie backs. So really, from what you see on the wall, it'll look essentially the same, but you will see the soil removed. Okay, so that's one project. Along St. Catherine's Way, Casino Way, and also on Pebbly Beach Road, we've got a project that we're putting out to a public bid, and that will move the K-rail it will also remove some of the talus down the chutes, so there's probably about 10 locations on those two roadways that'll relieve some of that debris that's coming down the hillside. And then we'll clean out with loaders and dump trucks that whole area and try to create a space behind that K-rail that could exist for 3 to 5 years without that debris kind of pooching out the chain link fence. And we have new chain link fence panels. You probably already see them. They're on Pebbly Beach Road, and they're to be replaced. That would all be one effort with hopefully a couple of contractors on the island and Public Works staff doing that. And that would happen here before the visitor season, so within the next couple of months. So it's just really getting that project bid and getting it going. But then we have this one where we have potentially a contractor on the island that built this wall originally is doing work up at Hamilton Cove, and we'd like to see if we can get this job done as quick as possible so that we don't see that the wall would have a failure. And then also we want to remove that material so it doesn't find its way down into the yacht club, so as we get more rain. So you can see right now we've got our eyes on this and trying to get it done. And so I think all of what you're asking is going to be done in the near future.
How long does the public bid thing go on for?
You'll see that get advertised probably not this week, Friday in the paper, but it will be out and be available to contractors within the next few days. And then it'll be where it has to be in the paper 2 times. So the Catalina Islander, so not this Friday, but the next Friday and the Friday after that, and then we can close those bids. We do have a geotech on board on our on-call engineering, and we have had discussions with Boulder Construction, the one that built this wall.
And has there been any engineering on the road, on the upper road that goes around the top? I mean, is some of this water damage as a result of water coming off the top and running down the hill?
We're looking into that. There is some water and a slip out that's further up by the Chimes Tower. And so, yeah, I've got to focus on that one too. This one appears that it could be water coming from the property above it and from sprinklers or some other source. So we're going to investigate that when we get down in there and make that repair, because you can see the slide is wet and it's wet down there, and it's not just the rain that's doing it. And even originally was built, I do have at least the original plans. You can see that that's that area that has that U shape there. That's where the slip is. Well, it was there somewhat already when this was originally built. And so that's where the drainage is.
That's above the yacht club?
That's right above the yacht club.
So that's where you see the wet trails still
Yes,
coming out. And
and that's where we have the K-rail. The K-rail's there, and with the plywood to stop in case it's kind of like almost like a conveyor belt right now, when it's just dumping the material over behind the K-rail, and we keep on cleaning it out. And that's just to manage it right now. Hopefully what we can do, we're looking to bring a large crane to put the piece of equipment that would actually do the tiebacks and place the piece of equipment up there. Then once we're done, then we would take the crane and move. And then once we unload the soil down below so that we can pick that up with loaders, we would now take the piece of equipment, an excavator, and so the crane would lower the excavator back to the road. And we're doing that so we make an attempt not to cause any more damage to the hillside. So that's part of just having the right personnel and the right equipment already on the island too, because we have the island factor of trying to get all that type of heavy equipment mobilized on a barge over here is quite expensive.
So you're a little out of my semantic wheelhouse, but so what you're saying is you have to do 2 bids, one for the Pebbly Beach and one for this project?
Yes.
And I thought the Pebbly Beach one had already gone out. But
it's gone out, but we just didn't, we weren't ready for that because I was having discussions with contractors also,
Gotcha.
the appropriate contractors that could bring the resources that we're on the islands, but it has to be put out to a public bid. But also with that type of equipment, if we had resources from the mainland come over, we would bringing all that over in a barge, and that gets to be cost prohibitive. So what I'm trying to set up is that toolbox of contractors and the resources here to be able to do this where it could be done again in the future, and it could be a regular maintenance activity. And everybody understand it at that point. This is what we do in every 3 to 5 years, and then we wouldn't be struggling. How do we get this done every time? You know,
So the Pebbly Beach bid is also part of the bid down on Crescent. Just
Yes.
the lower stuff behind the K-rail. This is number 4 is basically just dealing with the retaining wall and you getting the dirt down.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I think my concern is the timeline. I mean, that's gonna make it, I mean, I just would hate to see that road be, I know you don't have a choice because it's somewhere between weather and process, but it is gonna be kind of dicey if we're running this project in
So we'll
July.
probably be working on it on the 4th of July parade.
Absolutely, that's what I'm thinking, at best. At
So
best.
I guess if everything, all the stars align and the public bid is awarded to a local contractor, I know that they're ready to go. The resources are ready to go. It's
But they
really
don't have a crane. They do have a
They're-
crane, they don't have a crane.
Not for this one, for the one we're talking about. There is, my understanding is a crane will be on the island. Okay? So,
If they're talking
And-
on Hamilton doing it, I know the crane already exists out there. So
yeah, those are the type of resources, if we can come into agreement, and so those details have to be worked on. Even if we had to go to Plan B and I had to bring a crane, it's additional cost, but we've done that before just recently with the wastewater treatment plant, brought a very large crane to set a new mobile building at the wastewater treatment plant so that we could bring the personnel out of the office space that's over there and put them in a safer location.
And regarding Pebbly, I know we're not talking, this is on Crescent, but Pebbly is so dangerous, as you know, and I know you weren't here when that originally was put in, and it was another person that was in your position. When all these projects are done, can we I think it's important to maintain them, because I feel like that was put up and it lasted a long time. But I think it's getting so worn that I think if, the city can schedule, maintenance to remove those rocks and all that, because it's just so frightening. I feel like, when I go down there, I see rocks coming out and stuff, and I just...
So the good news of that is the city did purchase a new piece of equipment and a new dump truck.
Yeah, 'cause
so
that
we're
would be
able to
nice
do,
too,
and we
right?
also purchased a piece of equipment that attaches to our CAT to lift the K-rail. So we're able to do those things now, and so that's great. But also, we're working to get some on-call contracts, even with contractors here, so that we're able to move through the bidding process, procurement process easier, so then we can just say, okay, we need to do this again. And then it's just scheduling, okay? And so that's taken a while since I've been here, but we're starting to get those things done where it's easier, and understanding the constraints of the island and
Logistics.
And yes, logistics. So there's a little bit of a learning curve even for me on that, but I think we're getting there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else got anything else?
I don't have,
I make a motion to approve.
I'll close the public hearing. Bart,
Make a motion to approve. And I'll second the motion.
call for vote.
Commissioner Kennedy?
Aye.
Commissioner Glass?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Hewart?
Aye.
Chairman Montano?
Yes.
Commissioner Commissioner Patterson?
Yes.
And Commissioner Phillips?
Yes.
And just to be clear, we'll be bringing the resolution back next month.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving forward.
Our next item, this is a public hearing for an application for a site plan to renovate the entire interior and add 35 square feet total to one side and a spiral staircase to reach a new roof deck with a pitched roof in a single-family residence at 347 Descanso. The owner is John Kramer. This project started a few months ago under a building permit, and then once they got into it, we realized that the scope of the work really required some planning approvals for it. So if you go by the project, it does appear to already be under construction. So this is just a site plan application. We had noticed it for a coastal development permit, but then determined that because it is a single-family residence, it did not require the coastal development permit. It does meet all the other development standards except for the one side where they're adding the 35 square feet. They do not comply with the setback, but they're not increasing the degree of nonconformity on that side. And so we are recommending that you can make the findings to approve the site plan. We are recommending that you can find it categorically exempt under state CEQA guidelines existing facilities, and we're recommending that you can make, that was it, I'm sorry, the site plan and the CEQA findings.
So a quick question before
Yes,
I
ma'am.
open up the public hearing for staff. So this project is underway?
Yes, ma'am,
And
we're
it-
under construction.
And is this the first time you've seen it when they, has it had any permitting?
It's had building permits.
Right.
It came in and got building permits to renovate the structure.
Okay.
And then John was looking at it and realized that the scope of the work may need some
Require-
planning approvals.
okay.
And so that's when Mr. Kramer came in and submitted his application to go through this process.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm going to open up the public hearing. Does anybody care to speak on this item? Do you have any questions for the applicant?
I would like to know, is the 4x5 storage shed, is that a portable shed, or is that being constructed under the pergola?
It would be under the pergola, yeah.
And I see that you have the wall there it says for privacy.
Yeah, the back wall, yeah. Once we got up there on the actual site, you're looking straight into the windows and the people behind us, so for their privacy and our privacy, I just asked if I could increase that by another 4 feet. It was originally approved as a 4-foot wall all the way around, and then once we got up there, it just for privacy.
And the pergola roof is pitched?
Yeah, it would be sloped. Yeah, it'd be sloped to come down. And it's not really a roof, it's just a pergola that I'm going to put some sunshade on, and the whole purpose of that is just because, again, when we got up there in the middle of the summer with all the southward exposure, it's really hot. So that was the...
And it's within the height?
Yes, ma'am.
And then on the front of the facade of the building, on the front of the deck, are you going to build that up, or what happens?
No, it's just going to be capped. That's it. It's basically a 4-foot wall all the way around. It grows to 4 feet 5 inches, I believe, in the back because of the slope for the deck. But it goes 4 feet 5 down each side to 4 feet in the front, and then that'll just be capped with a copper cap. That's it.
Have you had any comments from the public or the neighbors
No, ma'am.
that came in that we don't? Okay.
My only concern is next door at 349, there's that chimney. It looks like it's not used, it's clean, but that will still be, I believe the law is it needs to be, the chimney needs to be 2 feet above anything within 10 feet around. And so by building this, that would make that chimney non-compliant next door.
Yeah, I'm not aware of...
Oh, at 349?
Yes.
I
Said
don't
it
know.
looks like they don't use it, but if they wanted to, it would be non-compliant with this building.
I don't know the answer to that, Micah. We could certainly condition the approval that the building official confirm that it's not going to create a non-compliance issue with that.
I would think that would be
Chimney.
tough, because if every time your neighbor has a chimney, you can't build the property.
And I think
Something like that would, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I suspect-
But that's the
Yeah.
law, I don't have a problem with it, and it looks like they don't use it,
We just
but,
noted in the,
yeah.
Well, and so I don't get lost in the weeds, I got another question. Maybe this question is best addressed to staff. The 35 square foot addition, which is what is actually here before us, is the actual addition square feet, the moving of a wall into a setback area, basically. That's why it's here, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The wall in question is labeled with a green line here, with an X. Is
Yep.
that correct? Okay. It's my understanding that that wall cannot have a window that doesn't exceed a 1 hour wall. It needs to exceed a 1 hour wall. So as long as that window is to code to prevent fire spread,
To meet the,
like glass block or however a window's constructed. Because we've had them before us before where those walls that were in a setback had no windows at all.
For
Right.
fire protection.
for the fire code.
Yeah, so
Correct.
that's really a question for building. Outside of that, beautiful house.
Thank you, thank you. And I believe the chimney, I'm just looking at the picture, and the chimney is behind the actual deck, so I don't know if that plays into, it's kind of deceiving there, but it's behind that back wall area. When you walk that, it's basically over the the previously existing and still roofing area, so I'm not sure if that plays into your question or
I
not.
didn't take a measurement when
Yeah.
I looked at it, but
Yeah.
it looked too close.
So we'll have Mr. Gilbert confirm the status of the chimney and the status of the window.
And I know that, and for your sake, I imagine that it's there so that it can emit some light into the place?
Well, yeah, that's where it's the bathroom, so it's a small window. Again.
So I know that in years past, glass block has complied
Okay.
with that fire code.
Yeah,
It's like
it's an Anderson
window.
Series 400 window. I know that from when I bought it. And just to make sure, the larger window to right where the arrow is going over, that is in the existing kitchen, and that was pre-existing. We actually removed window from that area. The window in fact in the area that was added is
The window in question.
up to the left, yeah, if you will. The window you're questioning is the small 1x4 window up to the left of that X, if you follow me. Not
So if-
the 3x4 that was in the existing kitchen, right.
So you had two windows in the old kitchen, and you're going to have two windows, what you're proposing now, but one's in the kitchen and one's in the bathroom.
Yeah, one's right.
But we'll have John
Actually, there
confirm
was.
But the problem is they're both within the setback. They're-
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, we actually eliminated window. There was more than, that whole wall was window, actually, in that existing kitchen.
And it's been the city's practice to allow people to keep windows that they already had, but that they could not enlarge them or create new windows in those non-compliant setbacks. But we'll have John confirm that.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a labor of love. It's been fun. Looking forward to relaxing for years to come.
So did we have a motion
Thank you.
yet?
I'm gonna, anything else for?
Oh, we didn't close the public hearing, my apologies.
I'm gonna close the public hearing. Thank you. Any other discussion?
Make a motion to approve with the two
Conditions.
conditions. One being the windows and two being the
Fireplace?
fireplace.
I'll second that.
Call for vote?
Commissioner Kennedy?
Aye?
Commissioner Glass?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Hewart?
Aye.
Chairman Montano?
Yes?
Commissioner Putnam?
Aye.
Commissioner Patterson?
Yes?
And Commissioner Phillips?
Yes.
All right, all ayes.
Okay.
Mr. Kramer, there is a 15-day appeal period, so 15 days from now, if no appeal is lodged, the approval would be final.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Okay.
Okay, our last item is one of our most favorite item. But we're making some good progress. So Rocio was able to put together a map for you that showed what the various percentages are and a list of the percentages between residential units and transient units. We did not include Hamilton Cove in this, but we have a map attached, but I think probably the most useful information is going to be the various percentages. And one of the things that the council had asked from us is that we come back and give them some of the various options that we wanted to propose. I believe the commission had reached a consensus on some of those options, but we just needed to come back with a number. That if we were going to impose a saturation or a cap, we needed to just pick a number that we would propose. And then the council's going to look at those various options and make the ultimate decision.
And one additional point on that in terms of saturation is so I had prepared a staff report on some of the options as I understood them from December. And one option, I've talked to one of our in-house sort of experts on cities that have done similar things with transient rentals, transition transient rentals. One thing to consider with the percentage is certainly for high density areas like Hamilton Cove that may be zoned differently. You could, or your preference and what could go up to council would be something that sort of excluded specific high density zones if that was a concern. Another consideration, sort of a standard that many local agencies have used when they're limiting an entitlement, because as I understand it, one of the options the commission discussed last month was the idea of potentially a one-off, one-on approach with streets, is from an enforcement perspective, maybe translating that into a set amount of distance, like 600 feet, with the understanding that the one-on, one-off approach would still apply because the existing transient rentals are grandfathered in for a certain amount of time, potentially, and then you have a one-off, one-on approach. So just some considerations to think about with saturation if the commission's preference is to do some sort of percentage or is interested in capping it based on sort of zone or something to that effect.
Okay, I'm going to open up to the public. Anybody like to speak? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing.
I'm looking at all this, and I like the change where we've changed the licensing for the CUP instead of the CUP. But as far as saturation, I'm actually for 3. I think if you start saying that all your neighbors can have one and I can't have one, you're just going to drive it underground. I also think that when you look at these homes, they're owned by people from the mainland. So if you say they can't do it, they do it anyhow, we lose out. If you say they can't do it and they're not using them, we're losing out. So either way, we're losing out as a city. It's not going to change the neighborhood because the neighborhood's still going to be full of the same people that live there year-round, and the vacation homes that are owned down there as vacation homes would still be empty. So my thing, when we've gone over this, we beat this thing for quite a while. I would stick with option 3, that it remains a status quo and you have the new licensing requirement.
Well, I'm going to disagree.
I'm sure you are.
Of course, I know. So I was looking at the numbers that were, that you presented in this, and to me, I'm going to go for the max on a 60/40 would be per street. And I do agree with upper, lower on certain areas because it's a big street. And I think that 60/40 should apply everywhere. So, but there were a couple of things we talked about, and I was thinking about, so my point of view is make it an administrative permit, not a land use entitlement, have it be a 60/40 saturation level, period, except for Hamilton Cove. I think Hamilton Cove and Bahia Vista should be, what are we going to do? And that would, it would be, eucalyptus would be a one on, one off. But other than that, there would still be allowable on some of the streets. So if it was 40% vacation rentals on Upper Catalina, there's still option of having vacation rentals. And the other thing I was going to say is, I would like to add something, because if our goal is to provide more housing, it would something to the effect of, it's either you can have a transient rental in your home if you're also A, providing year-round housing, or B, you're in residence. Because I'm watching the trend statewide of the kind of laws that people are passing, and one of the big ones is that you have to be living there. It seems to be what's going on now is like Palm Springs. La Quinta just said no to all of it, no more. And then LA County said you can have them if you are living in the house. Manhattan Beach said no. So I'm worried that if we're not set up with a little flexibility, that, you know, it's going to come down the pike that the state's going to mandate it, just like what we're dealing with now with the ADUs. So anyway, that's my proposal.
I see your thought process. And looking at this, and I understand about we have no housing. I'm surprised. I thought it would be higher percentage on these streets than they actually are, because it was so like.
It's always said the whole street's all.
I mean, because it was like panic, so many vacation rentals, and you were talking about 60%, right? That's what you were saying, 60% cap.
40%.
40% cap.
40%.
And we only have one street that's beyond that now.
We have two.
So, I mean.
We have two.
And I think part of that's because Rocio did a lot. I mean, the planning department really worked hard on like who, what, when, where, really.
This
right?
is a really good.
Well, I think
information.
staff has worked really hard to kind of to dot the i's and cross the t's and circle where we have strengths and where we have weaknesses. Paul, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I want to add to it a little bit. First, let's talk about entitlement. I agree, it should go as a permit process. Let's exclude from that dialogue Bahia Vista and any of the condo associations that have a CC&Rs. Let those associations deal with them the way they deal with them, and let them go with the property. Anything outside of a CC&R scope, let's amortize them over 2 years. Let's put a 2-year scope on them. After 2 years, they turn into a over-the-counter permit, an administrative permit, annually renewed. And I would like to add to that any CUP granted by the community through that process should be a use it or lose it. If you're going to have a CUP and you don't contribute $1,200 a year to the community, or have a year-round resident in it, or owner-occupied, you lose your CUP or you pay $1,200.
Isn't that already part of it? That use it or lose it?
Not
No?
defined.
Okay,
So
current,
so my thinking here is, over time, this 43% number is going to drop. You know, because I've got a CUP and it's no longer an entitlement with the property, is it really worth $1,200 a year to keep it? Is it, if I'm gonna pay $1,200 a year to keep this thing and I could make X amount of dollars on a year-round rental, that may encourage somebody to step off the fence and do a year-round rental. It may not. But at least it puts dollars in the city coffers that aren't normally coming there. It puts everybody on the same playing field, and it gives our community members the thought that we're focused on revenue to the city because that's our responsibility. That's our city's responsibility to generate revenue. It's going to keep people from trying to push them underground. And I'd like to move your number from 40% to 43%, because that's the highest of where we are anywhere right now. 3% isn't going to hurt us, and I think that in that way we're not going to be taking permits away from anybody or creating this little run on City Hall on issuing permits.
And I want you to go back to what you said about amortization.
2 years?
The 2 years, is that for, on a sale of a property?
No.
Twice, times, right?
No.
2 years from today, it no longer follows a property.
I think
So-
you run
so
into
in
a
other
problem
words, we're
of getting
not-
the city sued by the people that.
No, we're
That's
not
worries
we're not
me.
taking them.
It's not a take,
It's not a take. We're giving them an amortization schedule of 2 years to,
But they've
But what they
already
have
been
right now
approved
transfers with
and
their
have
property, so you are
required-
taking something from them. Because right now, my CUP on my home transfers with my property if I sell title.
and it will,
Not
because you're in Hamilton Code.
No, but.
Wait.
2
wait,
years
wait.
is what I wrote down, exactly what you said.
So,
It's
the
not legally a
proposal-
take.
The proposal was to allow the CUP to stay with the property until it sells. So the,
Once it's
so the
sold.
current owner still has the right to sell something.
Yep.
The city attorney, Mr. Campbell, suggested that you also allow it to go through a second sale,
But it doesn't transfer at that point.
but it wouldn't transfer at that
it would go to
point.
the
So the new buyer would know he was buying something that didn't transfer. Okay, so, but I want to get back to something else that Bob suggested. I'm concerned that if we create a different set of rules for condominiums, that we could be challenged that we're imposing eventually a license on non-condominium properties, whereas the condominium properties are able to keep their land use entitlement. So, but I think our goal is to craft this in a way where it's not seen as a taking from the current property owner because they bought this item, but to transition it in a way that the future buyer knows what they're buying.
Okay, all right, then.
Okay.
So, but
back to the CC&R part. So for example, Fairview used to allow CUPs way back in the day.
Right.
And they've modified their CC&Rs to disallow them.
Correct.
Okay, so those people basically suffered a taking. Whoever had one. Okay, whether that was challenged or not, it's kind of out of our realm. However, Hamilton Cove has a CC&R. They control what's going on there. 90% of those units, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bart, don't almost all of them have a CUP?
No, but about 110 out of 185,
110 out of 185, okay, pretty good percentage.
Yeah, over half.
So why don't we just let them deal with whether they have CUPs that follow the line or not? Why do we care?
I agree. I think but I don't think we need to create a special license for them, or a special process for them. Whether we go with a 2-year amortization or a 5-year amortization, I think that would just be what it is, and the CC&Rs would be an on top of governing agency. And so whatever type of permit we end up, process we have, I agree with you, Bob. The CC&Rs could then say, we're not allowing them within our complex, no matter what type of permit the city is issuing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So from previous discussions, was it a consensus that we wanted the amortization to kick over when it's sold?
yes,
Was that already a consensus?
it was because
We weren't-
Scott was concerned about the liability for the city, and that, and I already feel that there has already been some backlash regarding that, because I know I've been spoken to and people upset about, because nothing's set in stone right now, but there's all this talk about taking away, and when you take away, people get all panicked.
This was the
Well, and
way
I
to
think-
do it,
And
not-
so I think the city, and we discussed this, I think you were here once, maybe not, maybe you weren't here yet, Bob, but we discussed, because that was a very sticky, touchy situation, and we discussed letting it go, I thought once, but you're saying twice?
Scott was recommending twice.
That upon the second sale?
It was on the second sale. that-
So the other thing is, I think that, and the issue is discrimination, if you're going to say, like, that can be dicey too, that when you take that amortization and you sort of phase it,
Well, the
if
people
he,
that are buying it would know that they don't automatically get to transfer.
They're not buying something
Right,
they can
but
sell.
you-
People that are selling it are sticking with exactly what they've always had. They can sell it, the next person gets a CUP, the following person knows they don't get that right.
Correct.
That's how they bought it.
And the
So-
amortization is only, that we're speaking of, I think, is only talking about people that hold CUPs now. It's a land entitlement for 2 years, and then it goes into administrative. Is that what you're saying? Is you get
Well,
you get people time
No.
to get used to the fact?
I think it's two different options.
Right.
You could say at the end of 2 years, it's gonna, which is the amortization. And I just want to clarify something. A lot of people hear the word amortization, and a lot of cities use amortization to bring it to a dead stop. We're not doing that. We're using amortization to say we're amortizing it from one type of permit to another. So we're not recommending that we take it away from anyone's right
But
to
what you're
use
taking
the property.
away is the right for the person that when they sell it, that it
Correct.
automatically transfers with the land, which the bulk of these are that way, and I can tell you.
I agree.
I have one of them, and it will be a problem.
Right, so I think that's where the proposal comes in, that the current owner who has permit A keeps permit A for the life that they own the property. We even had a conversation today where your children might be able to inherit your permit, or if family members inherited your property, that would not be considered a sale or transfer for purposes of this program.
It should still be with that.
It would still go with the property. The new buyer is buying it knowing they will not be able to sell it. So
So it
you
goes
keep-
once.
It goes once.
Goes one
But
time,
I
yes.
think that's
the-
fair, Dan.
There was the proposal from Mr. Campbell was to take it twice, but I think it's going to be up to you what you want, which
what's-
benefit you see.
I think what his proposal was, it goes, the person that owns it today can sell it, that person gets a CUP. But when they sell it, it goes to it goes to the
License.
permit, the license.
Just an issue of semantics to reference. I think then it would work that the CUP extends to the initial sale, and then it would not be a conditional use permit that the buyer has if it doesn't transfer.
They have the license.
Right.
Yes.
And then, I mean, you could conceivably have them have that license for longer than what the commission is interested in having for renewal period. But it sounds to me like what the commission's describing is that the conditional use permit extends through one sale, but then the buyer of that property after that sale
Cannot sell it.
exactly.
Yes.
And they would, and I think the thought was that the buyer would automatically get the license, that they may not necessarily have to go through
Yes.
the normal application
The
process.
same way it goes today.
Yeah. Correct.
So,
I've got a question, kind of a procedural one. We're trying to come up with something to go to city council. Are we still?
Options,
Is it
options.
still 3 options?
That's up to you.
I mean,
The council wanted some
they
ideas
want-
on saturation, I think is what the
So
options
they
they were
want the
looking
3
for.
options on the saturation, not necessarily
the permit,
I believe the council was supportive of the licensing,
but we just have we?
but they wanted some options on saturation, was my recollection.
Okay, so if we can nail down the licensing part and how it gets amortized or how it gets phased in, and then still come up
With saturation.
With the 3 different ideas on saturation. Okay, good.
The way I sort of see it, and we're all playing telephone with Mr. Campbell, kind of, right? But the way I kind of see it is, it seems like there was some semblance of a consensus on amortization, and I think that would be presented to the council as, to the extent it was, the preference of the commission. And then I think there's 3 saturation options that are considered in the staff report, and we've sort of started to touch on those, and my thinking is probably those same 3 options would go to the council, but if the commission has a preference for one of them, for instance, I know Bob was talking a bit about taking saturation out of the equation. That's one of our 3 options. So I think, to the extent the commission has a preference, if there's an informal voice vote in favor of that or in favor of a 60-40 split on saturation, the idea being to give the council some options, but with a preference of the commission on what they think.
Well, I think Bob's, the 43 is fair. I mean, it's close to
That's
40.
fine.
It's close, I mean,
Yeah.
this is the highest one, and, I mean, I think that if you look at these percentages, I mean, I'm pretty happy with them, thinking that, I thought they were gonna be
Well,
at
they
least to
were.
60.
I think they were.
Until
I mean,
we
See,
cleaned it
see,
up.
that's my
Yeah.
point. We're saying there's this huge problem. We've been digging this stuff up for years and years and years, and we find out it's exactly as it's been for the last 10 or 15 years.
But,
And we did our job.
but,
Yeah.
yes, but the other thing is, moving forward, what does it look like as far as, if we can set a cap on these highly saturated areas, we can set that. But what does it look like to be able to afford more housing for the people year-round renting? And that's why I'm saying, I would love to see that, that somehow, when people have, want to have a permit to use for transient rental, that it is one of those other two options, that either they can if they're gonna provide year-round housing, or they can if they live in the house or something. I don't know. I think that's what's gonna trend, and I just think it would be, like in other areas of town, it would provide some more housing for people. So, I don't know, something,
I still go back to the fact that if you spent $1 million for a home, you're not gonna rent it out for $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 a month, because the nut's bigger than that. Doesn't matter what you do with it, it's not gonna translate.
but if you could
into a
still
good
also
housing
rent
resident.
it as a transient rental, then you've got
Well,
both good things
Another thing
going.
was brought up about, you've gotta have a minimum amount of money in it. If you've gotta bring in $1,200 to the city a year. You get into that, and now you're telling people that are renting it out, just like myself, when I go on vacation for a week or two, that I gotta rent it out more than that to fulfill whatever promise you're making to the city of making money. Whether I rent it out for 5 nights or 70 nights, the city makes money off of either one. If I'm renting it out for 5 nights, I'm not causing any problem to the city with all this transient rental is supposedly causing all these problems. I'm not using more sewer, I'm not doing all this. I'm paying you a city license every year for doing it, I'm paying you 12% of whatever I get out of it. But to say that if I don't make a certain amount of money, I mean, we could roll that over into everything from a lease to whatever, that if you don't make a certain amount of money for the city, then you don't get it.
So,
That doesn't seem
so
fair.
what you're saying is that if we do this, and it's on the flats, and we say that's the same percentage that could be on any street in Whitley, 43, 57, what is that
I'm saying
doing
it
to
hasn't
provide more
changed
housing?
right now. It hasn't changed right now in the last 15 years.
No, it
The number of these
hasn't, but the
CUPs
population has. That's the deal. I mean, yes.
But it's, what I'm telling you is it's not gonna add housing to year-round housing stock because the properties are worth too much money. The people bought them to come use them. So they vacation rental them when they're not using them. And we as a city, matter of fact, 55% of our budget comes from this, from the tote. So it would behoove us, if things aren't broken, let's quit rattling the ship until every bolt falls out of it. Because it's the only way the city's making any money. 55% of what we're doing, come on.
I think right now,
Chamber makes a
Paula-
couple bucks out of that, too.
but Paula,
What?
I love all your ideas, and I think they're great, and but.
Well,
honestly,
we're not making
no.
any kind, I'm just,
No,
I'm
just-
saying
I'm
it's
saying,
a
though,
choice.
Anyone here guarantee that if we do the one on and one off, that is, do we know for a fact that that's a guarantee that that's gonna create housing? No, but we need to work on something that we know that is going to guarantee housing for, affordable housing for the island. And that starts with the stakeholders, that starts with land, that starts with council, that starts with the city of Avalon.
Okay, how about
Those
this?
are guaranteed when you work collaboratively with people that can create housing and should create housing for affordable housing. Those are guarantees that those are gonna be affordable housing, and that is a guarantee. I just
Wait,
don't
go,
think that
Erin.
we can guarantee.
Well, I
mean,
don't like any of the one-on, one-off thing, because I think
Yeah.
it's too much for the city to track. I think that's,
Actually,
go ahead.
it looks like, I mean, if we're if we get too broad in this, I think it's
Can't be
going to stop.
enforced.
Well, how about
No, but
this?
what I'm
Go
thinking
ahead.
is, in terms of, really what we're doing is talking about saturation in this case with 3 options. And what I like is, this is like the old school environmental review where you would pretty much say, do nothing and then do 2 other things, and one is a little heavier duty than the other. So it really gets a good debate going, and I think we should just send these to the city council without a preference.
Yes.
And option 1, 2, and 3. And because I like option 1 the best, where it's just 1 on, 1 off, it sort of maintains the status quo and defines saturation as, that's where we are right now. We get a lot
So
of.
send the 2.
How
Send all
about
3?
exceeding
No,
saturation if you are also offering year-round rental? How about that?
You mean giving them an incentive?
No,
Yes.
no. Well, first I would go, before we refine it too much, just see if city council
Even likes it.
even likes any one of these 3. Because we have 3 pretty good ones, I think.
No,
One
they
are.
is,
I think so.
just change the process we're doing, but leave everything else the same. And that assumes we're doing really well, but we could do a little better. The other one is a freeze, which is the traditional way to solve problems here. And it just says, 1 on, 1 off, and each neighborhood is deemed saturated. We've had these homes coming in for quite a while, or these CUPs. So, and the volume of complaints has risen to the level that maybe this is what saturation is. And then the third one is, well, everybody should take their fair, or one of them is everybody should take their fair share. So 43% in all neighborhoods is an option. And I think those are 3 pretty good options. And I don't,
Can we
I'd say they're
add-
pretty refined.
What do you think about that?
But I would
That we
want
could say,
I would present that to city council, and hopefully,
something will come out
if
of
they
that.
like all of the,
Yeah.
maybe all 3 are fine with them, and they want us to pick one, or refine one, or combine them, or play with them, or they don't like, you know what I mean? I don't wanna, I'm thinking.
I
this
think
is
council
really
asked for
good, and
options,
I would
we
like
gave
to
them 3
hear-
options.
Right.
Done.
And
Yeah,
nowhere-
because I think we can, I'd rather stay relatively general at this point, and then refine it after some direction, because we
'Cause
might
now
be
we have-
getting so far out ahead.
But I
Trying to
also
refine 3
think if we
different ones.
don't come
Anyway,
up with,
that's my.
those are great ideas. But I also think if we don't come up with something, we're gonna be doing this again. Because we're gonna
may be doing it again
we're
anyway.
gonna be coming back here, oh, now we have saturation again.
No, but
And now we
I
have.
think this is.
No, but I
defined
mean, like,
separate.
if we should say, okay, because we kind of all agree. Do you all agree on like 43%?
No, I don't. I'm thinking it's 1 in, 1 off.
1 in, 1 on, 1 off. Okay.
You know what I mean? So that.
But
and-
that- but
and
we're
Bart
given
does-
that option.
Bart doesn't agree
Can we-
either, so let's,
Right.
Could we
we
say
have 3 options,
to
let's
the,
give
fo-
them.
to the 4357?
You know, and I wouldn't be surprised if city council looks at this and says,
Says-
what?
Yeah, that's kind of possible.
That's the
But we did our
problem.
job,
That's the problem. You said, we're gonna send it to them.
and they're gonna
And
have too many
I mean, you know,
options.
we deal with planning. Look at, they're scattered right now, they're understaffed. I mean, or, you know, they've only got 4. We're gonna give them this and they're gonna say, well, you know, this is all too complicated.
But in a way, it's not.
No, in a way, it's not. I'm
I mean, I
saying-
think it can be presented in a simple way.
Yeah, but,
However-
we're getting rid of these choices, and if they've got a full agenda, you think they're gonna sit there and spend this amount of time?
Well, they should.
It's a
But we're-
huge issue.
Right, but I don't want to go too far.
But they
to have
asked,
them-
this is
They
what they
asked
asked
for
for.
that.
This is what they asked for.
I'm
I
just,
keep it simple, stupid. I don't wanna say, well, we could do this. we
but
could
couldn't we
that.
do it, I mean, could I
We
just?
gotta word it so that it is really clear. And I still maintain, we've gotta tell them up front that we don't have all that many CUPs, period, that they're viable. And we don't know, we haven't had any hearings, but how many other people have relinquished theirs?
We've had a few relinquish them. I think we're down to how many that we're looking possible revocation?
Just for 10.
10.
10?
So how many have relinquished so far?
Probably had about 6 or 8 say they weren't
So,
going to use
there
them
you go.
anymore.
Like
We had some
That's
people.
several months of CUPs that are just status quo again. Like I said, we're right back to square one.
And we confirmed, I think,
What I'm
12 that are banked.
But this is the thing, if the city council doesn't know, because we haven't known, and we still got stuff up in a state of flux if somebody else gives one up, you don't know how many there are.
But you do know, because this
The
list,
city
Because
council-
she just-
I'm
this,
talking-
but the list that in this staff report is based on approved rentals, whether they're subject on the revocation list or not. This is kind of like,
No, I understand what the list is.
Well, so let me ask a couple questions to add to the list here. Sol Vista, how many are up in Sol Vista?
I don't think we counted Sol Vista.
We did cancel
How-
the stuff. There's
how about
1, 2,
Canyon
3.
Terrace?
Wait, Rocio was telling you.
There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 8 in Sylvester, and in Canyon Terrace there are 3. And this list, we also are grandfathered, and these are the ones that have come up to the Planning Commission and have been approved. And we decided to also add the ones that are banked because we don't know when they will
So
decide to
some
put
of
it
them
back.
aren't even being used.
Yes,
correct?
right.
On the 4753, 4753.
4357.
Whatever. Either way, that thing, how about if, I'm just trying to figure out ways to, could we say the cap could be exceeded if someone proposed to do a year-round rental within a property as well as a transient rental?
Maybe a new.
That would be
That
like,
you could,
that
yes,
would be like
a
assuming
new
you had a duplex.
application
I'm saying-
So if you had
above
a
the
single
cap.
family residence, it would mean nothing.
What?
If you had it would be assuming you had a duplex.
Well,
Right.
it is
Which
what it
there's
is.
very, very few duplexes
But
on
it
this
could
island.
be, I
Yeah,
mean,
and my argument is.
What?
That's way too refined of a discussion
okay.
based on what?
I'm just looking
If we're trying to
at,
get into that, then we really need to just.
if you
pick one and then I think that's
exclude the
Okay.
CUPs, if you exclude the CUPs from the condominium developments, Bahia Vista, Hamilton, the last two we were talking about, we're looking at 139 CUPs. This is the vast problem you guys have been complaining about forever. 139 CUPs, are you kidding me?
Well,
We
yeah,
have
but
played
they're
this
all
game for
but
months and
Bart,
months and months.
They're all concentrated in the same place. That's the thing.
Listen, on my street,
Okay, I know.
I got 80% on my street. What does
We're
that
not
mean?
gonna
I
come
gotta
to a
burn the houses
consensus. We
down?
have three options.
But
Okay,
I'm
so-
just saying,
Let's just
we
let
have
it go.
blown
Let's
this
not
thing
start
so
the-
out of
the same-
proportion.
Okay, we need to,
139
we need
CUPs
to
in
make a
Bethesda.
motion, we need
Could
to.
I make a motion?
Is it?
Yeah. I make a motion that we present in a simplified but clearer way to city council the three options. To give them something to think about, to either send to us to make a recommendation, or to develop any one of the three, or any two of the three, or three of the three.
And where is
with
it?
or without a recommendation.
It's on the back.
But to take it.
Okay, but where's the deal that says, which one is saying a percentage? Which
Okay.
one
So
of these
option
options
two,
gives any
we would
percentage?
clarify the percentage.
Okay, so are we gonna?
I would just stick with this at this point, and if anything, generalize it.
But I mean, the
But
option
option-
two.
So option two would change.
Option two,
Option two would change to 43%.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
that's what I'm saying.
And option one uses the 600 feet. You know, it's,
I think
600
and then.
it sounds like the commission's, the 43% has been something where that's been discussed. I think the idea of the feet requirement has been less partial to this body in terms of their thinking. So with Eric's sort of motion, I think the idea of sending all three, but perhaps in reflective of this discussion, adding in reference to the 43%, for instance, in option two.
And this is for
And-
all,
And 100% of the language here in section A in the staff report needs to be Xed and change it to the on sale of property rather than a 2-year, 7-year, whatever, all of those recommendations.
Right, so
Find that around down to.
Yeah, so the amortization is a separate.
and I think that's a great point by Bob. It sounds like there's been consensus, even perhaps before this meeting, that the idea, and that would go up as part of, the council's looking at the saturation options, And then the sort of what comes up from the commission on amortization is actually the idea we've been discussing this evening about it transfers through the first sale, and then it's a
Licensing.
it's a license on the
second person
buyer.
sells it.
On the buyer, right?
No, it was well, it would be a license, but he automatically got the CUP, because that's what transferring it did. But when he sold it to the next person, then they've got to come up for the review and everything else, correct?
So the current owner would retain his CUP until he sells it. The first buyer, I
It's
think
a
this is the question,
Yeah.
would the first buyer also get the CUP? Or would the first buyer be guaranteed the license?
See, the way
I
we
thought
had
it was
discussed
the
it before,
CUP,
he
but
would
then
also get the CUP.
That
but
expires
when-
on its sale.
That expires on its sale, exactly.
Right.
Because that way he bought it with the same thing that person had sold it with, but
Okay.
he now no longer gets to transfer
So the
that.
second transaction is he
property.
gets a CUP that does not transfer,
Yes. And then.
or a license.
Yep.
He
I was
knows it
going to
when
say,
he bought it.
right,
He
and I
knows
think
it.
that was my confusion a bit, because the semantics would be a little different, since the buyer would have it for the lifetime of his ownership of the property,
Right.
the first buyer, but it wouldn't actually be a conditional use permit because it wouldn't run with the land. So it wouldn't extend beyond the buyer.
Yes.
If he's buying, if somebody's buying it, you have an existing CUP, which is a right, and I'm sorry, I mean, you want to talk semantics? It runs with the property.
Right,
For the
and that,
current buyer.
And that's the end of my
Right.
motion.
If we get into administrative things, that's a permission. But I won't vote for anything that says that the it won't be a CUP anymore. If it's a CUP, it's a CUP, and if we can get it down to the third buyer, fine.
The third
But
buyer
third
becomes a
buyer
license.
Or second.
The second buyer, excuse me, yeah.
Okay, third owner, second buyer.
So the current owner keeps the CUP for the life that they own the property.
As does the buyer,
Yeah.
the next owner.
So the next buyer is buying something that's disclosed to him what he's buying. So if you're disclosing to the buyer, you're going to get a license that allows you to rent this property for the life that you own it, but you can't sell that right
Yes.
to the second buyer.
That would make sense.
So when do we
Does that
start
sound right to
issuing
you?
licenses, not CUPs?
Brand new ones, a
Brand new
brand new
ones.
application would be
Yeah.
licenses from the beginning.
It's
We're,
hard.
we're talking about how the current ones are going to transition
administered,
into
yeah.
licenses.
So basically, the whole point was the current license is not to run with the land.
A brand new application.
I get
No,
that.
I know. So now, basically, we just need to figure out
What I'd like to do.
what saturation
I'd
is,
like- I
because
know.
we already determined that that's not gonna happen anymore.
But I'd like to see us not do CUPs anymore and start, if somebody comes in now.
Then we start
We
doing
would.
That's what we're
licenses.
doing.
Yes.
Once they pass this,
And that was my
exactly,
question.
Sandy.
So
Yes.
that's
Once
gonna
they
take
pass
effect
this, then
once
it's all
this is
licensed.
passed.
Yes.
Right.
So if somebody comes in tomorrow and presents you with an application.
It's a CUP.
It's a
you know,
CUP.
Correct,
city
until the council adopts it, correct.
Got it.
and I would,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
How long, I mean, what kind of timeline is that?
Well, it takes
We have to do something to them first.
Right.
I mean,
if
well,
the-
the other, I know,
So we're
but
gonna get a run for a minute
just
here.
saying, and so the other thing I want to know is, like, I want to, whatever gets, I think this needs one more cleanup before we send it, because I kind of want to see it one more time. Before,
I mean, I think we
That
come to an
wasn't,
agreement.
that wasn't a
what
part of my unseconded motion. So I don't know if it's still
So-
on. Does anybody want
No,
to second?
yeah, before we go on to the second of Eric's, I just think the amortization part would just be changed, and I know, Mr. Campbell knows exactly what we had spoke of and what we were all speaking of now to write that, to do the wording for it. Correct?
Yeah, so section A is basically that there's not any language in there that talks about what owner it rolls over to. It's all about, like a time clock on 2 years, 4 years, 7 years, whatever. So-
It does say the idea of a rental CUP sold twice, then the entitlement becomes a license. But I mean, I think the consensus among the commission as part of this discussion is that I do understand where, we've talked about the two owners and yes, certainly the city attorney understands that from last time, and I have a good read of that in terms of what goes up to the commission. I'm sorry, what goes up to the council on that. So I think it's accurate that what remains is the question of saturation and Eric's open motion or an
Well,
alternative
wait, can I
motion?
just say one more thing? So
I'll second that motion.
Okay, go ahead and second it. But before we vote, can I just say one more thing? So I just want to say, I feel all of your pain, those of you who have been sitting here for a while. So I'm just going to say, like, what would happen, you know, like, we can send this to the council. Are they going to are they just going to kick it down the road?
They could.
Well, if we have if we have the same people, then, but if we said, we don't want to do this again, you know, when it starts to rumble about, can we propose this to a new council?
No, the thing about it is, I feel that the council and
Careful, you're a candidate.
Yeah, I know. I don't, maybe you should.
I just don't feel like
I swear, Your Honor.
No, I'm not, nothing on me.
No.
I just feel like it's like, I just feel like that's not fair. They're there to make decisions.
But if they don't,
and I feel like that, and that's not fair to the council that's there right now, and that's not fair either, because I think that also people are gonna vote for people that you think that's gonna vote one way or the other, and I think that we're here all for the good of our residents, and we're here right now today to make these decisions.
No,
and
I agree.
So are they, just like
But look how long it took us
Cassidy
to get
stated.
here.
So I don't like to hear that, let's wait until the next.
Or longer.
That's what I'm saying. And that we have a month, we have 5 weeks till the election.
We don't know.
So what I'm saying is, if we do play kick the can, I mean, if that's what it is, I just am thinking.
I think
One
7
would
months,
hope-
we're not kicking the can. We have lived in the can, I get my worms for fishing out.
I get where you're coming from.
You know what I mean?
In reality, this is not the first time. Amanda, you've been here how many years?
Yeah, no, I
So
know.
this is not the first time that the council
No, but I'm just saying.
asked the planning commission for advice and direction on planning-related issues. And there were times when they came back to us, and
It was
we had,
election.
there was times we had joint meetings. There was times that we walked down the path and honored the suggestion of the planning commission, and there were times where we didn't make a decision.
Right.
So what we've been asked to do is give direction. And I think your motion and a second is worthy of that direction.
No, I do
And-
too. I'm just saying.
And that,
We can't know.
and we need to be willing for them to turn this thing, they could turn this thing back around and say, hey, can you redefine number 3 for me? Can you walk us down that street?
It'd be great.
That's why we need to keep it simple.
Right.
Not so general that they can't, that it's gonna take them forever. We've gotta keep it simple and concise.
Does it help if it's going to be on their agenda? Does it help if some of us are there to explain what
We
our
can't-
reasoning was? I thought you could. They've asked me stuff
We
before.
can hold a joint meeting
Yeah,
and
we'd
include
have
them
to-
in the dialogue and
Okay.
You
discussion.
gotta squeeze it in.
Because they've asked me questions at city council meetings, so
You have to kind of really be careful with that.
I imagine. It was not on this subject
Right.
whatsoever, so, I can't even remember what it was, but.
Well, my suggestion would be that we refine the language of what goes to them. And instead of having it being such a wordy document, really, we've got 3 options. Our amortization solution is this.
X.
Our saturation solution is a choice of 3 things. Status quo, 43%, and what was the third? One on, one off. Those are the 3 options.
Yeah.
And then if they want for us to further study and explain any one of those 3 options, then they can kick it back to us and say, hey, this is where we're leading, and can you refine that one choice? And then we can debate on that one element.
3 meetings.
I'm happy with that.
Okay, all right.
Let's
So-
just
shall we
hope-
No, let's go, let's go.
And, I mean, I think
Let's take a vote.
I think we've come a long way.
Okay, I want to know what's going on down here. I want to know what's going on down here. Anyway,
Waiting patiently.
Okay.
It was fine.
That motion?
And a second?
Second?
Let's
Okay.
vote.
Call for vote.
Commissioner Kennedy,
Aye.
Commissioner Glass,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Hewart,
Aye.
Chairman Montano,
Yes.
Commissioner Putnam,
Aye.
Commissioner Patterson,
Yes.
and Commissioner Phillips.
Yes.
All ayes.
And can you imagine that? Unanimous.
After all that, wait,
Okay.
All that, it's like forever stuff. It's really
Does, that's it on the agenda. Does any commissioners have any, commissioner business they'd like to discuss?
Can we encourage our council to push Edison to lease water?
Yeah.
That I would agree with.
I
That would make
concur.
sense.
And there's no update on that?
I
Regarding-
haven't heard, we did have a meeting, I think it's okay to talk to them about the wet wells project. We had a meeting with Edison that they're moving forward, part of the work that they're gonna be doing under that really nice grant they got from the state, 10 million. They're going to be putting in some new wet wells out at the quarry so that they can, increase the production in the desal plants. They're also going to be doing some upgrades to the older desal plant so that it increases its production. The second part of that project is to upgrade the pipeline between here and Wrigley Terrace so that that pipe can run both directions, so.
When you say
desal-
Wrigley Terrace, are you talking
Wrigley
Wrigley
Terrace
Reservoir?
Summit?
Not Wrigley Terrace Road, Wrigley
Summit.
Reservoir up at the summit.
And so then the
So that could
idea
be-
is for that's gonna be the storage.
Be storage from the desal, right.
And that way, new pipes wouldn't be required to go to Hamilton, because we're already, that's where we draw.
There would be
So
some
we'd all be on the
changes, I
same
think,
water.
there'd be some changes out there as well. So I asked the question, does this mean the allocations are on hold until this is finished? And they weren't able to give
But
me.
I thought,
That's a nice try.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought once we hit that threshold of a certain, that we're automatic.
Supposed to be.
I think,
Is there, has
The
the
way
city?
that, well, the way the safe annual yield is presented, once they hit X amount of acre feet, they go on rationing. Once they hit X amount of acre, they're above
That's-
that, then they have to allocate water regardless
so
of.
I don't know who would be responsible to go to the CPUC and say the tariffs.
Maybe
aren't
the
being-
city can
Well-
have these discussions and,
It's something that has to happen above our food grade here.
Yeah.
So we need to push our elected officials and city attorney to push those buttons.
okay.
Okay, good night, Tony.
Anybody else? All right, the meeting
Thank
is
you, everyone,
adjourned.
for all your hard work.
Thank you, Amanda, and Rocio, for all your
Yeah.
hard work.
Thank you, Mr. Rosen.
This
for
is
your-
not an easy task.
You're really clear. I don't know.
You're gonna write that.
Sometimes Scott's
Yes,
cryptic.
yep, you bet.